And now we move on to red with Arclight Phoenix. Arclight Phoenix is a 4-mana 3/2 Phoenix with flying and haste at the beginning of combat on your turn. If you've cast 3 or more instants and sorcery spells this turn, return Arclight Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now, my initial impression of this card was it is pretty bad. And I think I'm still on that side of things. But if you are playing a deck that has a lot of discard and surveil and ways to get Arclight Phoenixes into the graveyard, things like Chart the Course and some other cantrips we'll get to later, so you already have a high spell density and those spells are discarding things, it's not particularly difficult to keep recurring Arclight Phoenixes, especially if you are an Izzet, where you have Goblin Electromancer to make things cheap to multi-spell turn. If you're just playing a high density of cantrips, then you could actually recur like multiple Arclight Phoenixes fairly easily. Like once you start getting many of these in the graveyard, then it becomes better. So while this card is very bad in its face, if you are playing a deck with a fair amount of discard outlets, be it Chart the Course or whatever other options you find, so the downside of putting this card in your deck is lower. You can just discard it whenever. If they deal with it, sure. If they don't, they're going to probably have a bad time. I think that this card is actually fine. I think that I would not be shocked if people conjure up a deck that plays Arclight Phoenix. Especially with how well this card interacts with Jumpstart, where you can have this card in your hand, discard it to Jumpstart, and then you just cast a spell with the Jumpstart. You're already 1 spell towards your 3. You can just immediately get back Arclight Phoenix. See, like, this is the Jumpstart Think Twice that we saw earlier. That would enable, like, Arclight Phoenix things. Like, that's what you would play that card in. So I'm not willing to write this card off. The more I've thought about it, the more I've come around to the possibility of there being shells that do enable this card reasonably well at a fairly low opportunity cost due to the reasonably high density of spells that those decks have access to, and discard outlets. Barging Sergeant is a pretty reasonable limited card. I think that Petrify actually said this card's bad and limited. I disagree. I think that this card is good and limited, but it's a limited card. Book Devourer is a 6-mana 4/5 beast with trample. Whenever Book Devourer deals combat damage to a player, you may discard all cards in your hand if you do draw that many. Not something I would want to play on purpose in pretty much any format. Maybe it enables some, it does churn through your hand, but at turn 7. So, Command the Storm. Command the Storm is 5 mana, instant, deals 5 damage to target creature. Pretty solid removal spell in limited. Not really something you will likely need to turn to for constructed. Cool art, though. Cosmictronic Wave. Got that the first time. 4 mana sorcery. Cosmictronic Wave deals 1 damage to each creature your opponent control, and they can't block this turn. So that's a limited thing, like a medium playable limited effect, where you just get to falter all your opponent's blockers and kill them. Usually have better options to do that in constructed. I'm very sad that the name Cosmictronic Wave was wasted on a medium to bad limited card. Speaking of medium to bad limited cards, Direct Current. 3 mana sorcery, Direct Current deals 2 damage to any target Jumpstart. I don't know why I want to play 3 mana for a shock. Why would I do that? For who, for what? Electrostatic Field. Electrostatic Field is a 2 mana 0/4 defender. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Electrostatic Field deals 1 damage to each opponent. This is a card that I wouldn't be shocked to see show up in some, like, what's that card called? A card similar to this has been played in the past. Thermo Alchemist. There have been decks like this in the past revolving around a card that can ping your opponent, and then when you cast a spell, untap it. So it was effectively the same thing as this. So whenever you have, like, a deck with, like, Goblin Electromancer and you want to play a bunch of spells in the turn, Electrostatic Field not only helps you survive to get to the point where you're doing all your nonsense, it actually is your win condition as well. So I wouldn't be shocked to see this pop up, even as just like a sideboard card in some like Izzet strategies. So I think that this has legs. Exactly what the shell looks like it goes in yet, I'm not entirely sure, but there is precedent for cards like this seeing play. Erratic Cyclops is a 4 mana 0/8 Cyclops Shaman with trample. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Erratic Cyclops gets +X+0 until end of turn, where X is the spell's converted mana cost. So this guy could get large and in charge, but you have to do some work to make him good. It is a 4 mana 8 toughness creature, which is solid. It's going to be reasonably difficult to kill. Doesn't impact the board initially. It's possible you could like just kill your opponent with this guy. It's not something I'm personally interested in because it kind of walks into removal. It forces you to play your stuff main phase, which is generally not going to work out well for you. So my inclination is this card is not great, but if you're in the business of memes, you can do some pretty cool stuff with this guy. Here for it. Experimental Frenzy. Experimental Frenzy is a 4-mana enchantment. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play the top card of your library, and you can't play cards from your hand. You can pay 4 mana to destroy Experimental Frenzy. This is a really interesting, like, this is a cool design. It's a fun card. It's not something I expect to be particularly competitive. It does have the very powerful line of text of you may play the top card of your library. That could conceivably allow you to just like churn through your deck under certain circumstances. I don't know if those will have those circumstances in standard. The chain stops when you hit 2 lands in a row. So I think that it's unlikely this is going to be played competitively, but you do get to do some fairly cool and interesting stuff if you are willing to meme a bit. But not something that I would be trying to win games with. Fearless Halberdier is a 3-mana 3/2. That's the whole joke. Seems like a solid 3-drop in limited. Fire Urchin is a 2-mana 1/3 elemental with trample. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Fire Urchin gets +1/+0 until end of turn. This card actually is closer to playable. Like a 2-mana 1/3 is like fine. It blocks, and then this one has the upside of like being a bad Kiln Fiend. So there's probably better stuff going on, but this seems like not outside the realm, depending upon how deep we can go on the play bunch of spells a turn stuff. Pretty solid limited, though. Goblin Banneret. Goblin Banneret is a 1-mana 1/1 Goblin Soldier with Mentor. Goblin Banneret can pay 2 mana to give himself +2/+0 until end of turn. So this is a 1-drop that, like we said before, with Mentor, when you have like a big mentor thing and it pumps lower mentor thing, and the lower mentor thing can pump the lower mentor thing, and like when you pump mentor things, it makes them able to pump bigger mentor things. So just having like all the mentor things like alongside each other is really good. This is a 1-drop that you can like play and then play the knight that we saw before, and then have this mentor the banneret, and then this mentor other things. It also can pump itself, not only to just like deal more damage as a 1-drop, but also to make its power bigger to be able to mentor other things. So this is probably going to be one of the main 1-drops in the format. Not even necessarily because it's like very good, but because like there aren't many alternatives, and this card is not bad. Goblin Crater Maker, aka Karn's Bane. 2-mana 2/2, Goblin Warrior. You can pay 1 mana to sacrifice Goblin Chain Maker or Crater Maker and choose one. Goblin Crater Maker deals 2 damage to target creature, or destroy target colorless non-land permanent. So the only colorless non-land permanent that is not an artifact in standard is Karn. So he can kill artifacts, he can kill Karn, he can kill things with 2 toughness. This seems like a totally reasonable card. I'm not sure exactly what shell this would go in. Aggressive red decks probably want a little bit more from their 2-drops power-wise, although depending upon how problematic the things this kills for that deck are, you may want to play this. Probably show up at least in sideboards. This seems like a reasonably flexible card. I think it's definitely like power level wise good enough to be played and constructed. It's just a fundamentally reactive card, so it depends upon how prevalent the things it kills are and like what shells would be playing this. I don't have good answers to either of those questions yet, but keep an eye on this card as an option to deal with things like Karn or artifacts or what have you. Goblin Locksmith. Goblin Locksmith is a 2-mana 2/1 that when it attacks, creatures with Defender can't block this turn. Seems like a solid limited 2-drop. Gravatic Punch. 4-mana sorcery. Target creature you control deals deals damage equal to its power to target player. Jumpstart. Interesting. It's way too expensive for constructed, but it's cool that what's that effect called? It was an Innistrad before. But yeah, this is probably just bad in all formats. Howell Kite Whelp. The only dragon in the set. Bible thump. 5-mana 3/3 flyer. Whenever Howell Kite Whelp attacks, it deals 1 damage to target creature defending player controls. This card seems very good and limited. It is not something we can really play in Constructed, sadly enough. Just wanted any dragons. I did get one dragon. We got one dragon. Inescapable Blaze. 6 mana instant. The spell can't be countered. Inescapable Blaze deals 6 damage to any target. This is obviously too expensive for Constructed, although there are things like Goblin Electromancer in the format that can like lower this, and then maybe if you care about it not being countered and you want to burn or something. It seems unlikely to me. It seems like just a solid removal spell for a limited that can also go face. Banefire is probably going to be better than this in Constructed in most cases. So not something I'm really interested in my Constructed decks. This card, on the other hand, is something I am very interested in my Constructed decks. Lava Coil is a 2-mana sorcery. Lava Coil deals 4 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile instead. This is literally exactly the card I wanted for like Mirari Conjecture and other decks. I was literally like, man, I wish that Cut like didn't have ribbons but just exiled instead. And then, oh look, they made that card. So this is going to be one of the like best removal spells in the format. It kills most things you care about. It exiles all of those things, like Rekindling Phoenix and like the various graveyard synergies we've seen throughout the set review and will continue to see. So Lava Coil is big game. It's things with 5 toughness get much better because of Lava Coil creating that flashpoint. If you like things like Aurelia, which we will get to that have 5 toughness, get much better in the format because of cards like Lava Coil being one of the premier things to remove it with. So I'm going to be playing a bunch of this card. It's one of the better removal spells in the set, certainly, and you're going to have to build your decks in consideration of this depending upon how prevalent red decks become. Legion War Boss. Legion Rabblemaster. 3 mana 2/2 Goblin Soldier with Mentor. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. That token gains haste until end of turn and attacks this combat if able. So this is a callback to Goblin Rabblemaster, which functioned in a very similar way, but instead of this card getting pumped by the number of attacking goblins you have, it can pump the goblins via Mentor. So you would play Legion War Boss, you get a 1/1, the 1/1 attacks. On the next turn, you can attack with the 2 1/1s you would have by that point and pump one of them with Legion War Boss. Legion War Boss is also a pretty small creature, so it can very easily get mentored by your other things. So this is a pretty solid card. It's probably going to be one of the cornerstones of red aggressive decks for its legality, if Goblin Rabblemaster was any indication. So yeah, we're going to see a fair amount of Legion War Boss, and it's going to be a really important card for the Boros decks. Maniacal Rage. Maniacal Rage is a 2-mana enchantment. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2, can't block. Weird limited thing. Maximize Velocity is a 1-mana sorcery. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains haste until end of turn jumpstart. This actually seems pretty solid and limited. The fact that you can keep giving things haste with like jumpstart, it does cost a card, which is not the best, but it can convert into a fair amount of damage, so you may play like one of these in the aggressive limited decks. Ornery Goblin. Ornery Goblin is a 2-mana 2/1 goblin. Whenever Ornery Goblin blocks or becomes blocked by a creature, Ornery Goblin deals 1 damage to that creature. So it essentially can't be blocked by 1 toughness things, and 1 toughness things can't attack into it. Probably not good enough for Constructed. Pretty solid and limited though. Here we go. Risk Factor. Risk Factor is a 3-mana instant. Target opponent may have Risk Factor deal 4 damage to them. If that player doesn't, you draw 3 cards. Jumpstart. So this is a remake of Browbeat, which is a historically bad card. It kind of exists as the example to explain why Punisher mechanics are not good, because your opponent gets to choose whichever option is like better for them. If you're at 4, the Risk Factor can't ever kill them. If you're at a big life total, they just take 4 and then it doesn't matter. So if you're in a spot where in an aggressive deck, you can get them down to a low enough life total where they can't afford to take the 4 damage from that side of Risk Factor and you're able to refuel with the draw 3, that would be how you make this card good. The fact that it has Jumpstart is also relevant for aggressive decks because it prevents Flood. So those things I do think make Risk Factor playable. Like the Jumpstart is pretty relevant and does give it an edge over a Browbeat just on like a power level basis in the decks you would want to play it with. But you have to be pressuring your opponent's life total to the point where it becomes a draw 3. That's when it becomes like But even then, you're comparing it to Flame of Keld, and I'm not sure that this is better than Flame of Keld. Probably is not. Rollbelt Boar is a 4-mana 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, target creature with +2/+0. Seems good and limited. Runaway Steamkin. This is a more interesting card. 2-mana 1/1 elemental. Whenever you cast a red spell, if Runaway Steamkin has fewer than 3 +1/+1 counters on it, put a +1/+1 counter on Runaway Steamkin. And you can remove 3 +1/+1 counters from Runaway Steamkin to add 3 mana. I'm not sure about how often the second line of text is going to come up, but just having a 2-drop that can become a 4/4, there's usually applications for cards like that. For example, like in the case of Runaway Steamkin, you could, in an aggressive red deck, just on turn 2 Runaway Steamkin, next turn Lightning Strike your guy, play a 1-drop, attack with my 3/3. That's very strong. So if you're just using him in a pretty low to the ground aggressive deck, that seems fine. It is also possible to use him as a storm enabler to some extent. The fact that it only makes red mana kind of makes this more difficult, but you can like play some spells and then get mana and then play more spells and then get more mana. If you have like multiple of these in play, then you can like kind of go off. But I expect the main application of this card to be in like mono red or heavily red aggressive decks, to just like play this and then have a double spell turn and you're doing it. But I certainly am interested in trying out the whole like get a bunch of mana thing. That intrigues me. Torch Courier is a 1-mana 1/1 haste. Sacrifice Torch Courier, another creature gains haste until end of turn. This might be the 1-drop you play in this format. That would suck. I mean, we played Fanatical Firebrand, although we still have Fanatical Firebrand, and Fanatical Firebrand is probably better than this. So, and Wojek Bodyguard. Wojek Bodyguard is a 3-mana 3/3 with Mentor. Can't attack or block alone. Medium limited card.